Hi guys, and welcome back to Conversations to Inspire. Today I'll be talking to Melanie Gow. Melanie is an inspirational speaker, writer, and the first ever British woman to direct a movie that came out in the cinemas. She has been on some amazing adventures, but I'll let her tell you about them. Hi, and thank you for being on my interview.
Thank you, Annabelle, for having me.
So, how would you describe your life?
That's a really interesting one, isn't it? Absolutely mine is what I would describe it as. And I think that that's a really important a place to be. So you can get really caught up, I think, in what you should be doing and how you should be doing it and where you should be, in inverted commas. But I think that's how I describe my life, is absolutely mine. I get to decide what I want to do every day and how to do it. And most of the time, I set the challenge too far ahead, too big, because I kind of like to scare myself. But then I just think, well, it's absolutely my life, and so it's up to me to do it.
Could you tell me a bit about your background, please?
Okay. Well, I was born in Kenya in East Africa, just about the time when the world was paying attention to my very tiny little corner of the planet. So we had National Geographic photographers in my back garden, and the pioneering wildlife makers were in my neighborhood, were my neighbors. Richard Leakey, who discovered the origin of the species, he was a family friend. My father gave me a camera when I was 6 years old, and my mother taught me to read and write before I went to school. And so what they taught me and what I saw was filmmakers and writers and photographers who were able to tell stories about little tiny places like mine to the whole world. And I could see just how powerful that was. I saw that these tools were very powerful, whether the film was moving or not. It was able to transcend borders, and they could take me anywhere. And I think that was really, really important. I was kind of skinny and an awkward misfit. And I'm a girl, and I come from a third world country. And so I could see with these tools that I could reach anywhere. And to that end, I could probably get further than I imagined. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Cool.
Where did you get your love of travel from?
Well, see, I would argue that when I was a little girl, a trip down to the bottom of my garden was pretty much a big adventure, especially with my dad, because he would take me down there and he'd show me some wood hoopoo nests, or flying ants would come out, and we'd all scamper down to the bottom of the garden. But so, and obviously as a family, we'd go on safaris. So just it within our own country, it was always a huge adventure. There was always like a buffalo who was charging us, or a river that was flooded, and it always took forever to get where we were going, and that was part of the journey. But well, and my garden ended in Lake Naivasha, and that's a flamingo lake with hippos in it, and they used to come and eat our vegetables at night time. But big politics meant that we were forcibly repatriated back to the UK, even though I was second generation born in Kenya, so I'd never been here. My parents hadn't been here. And it was that difference between those two countries, my vast arid savanna of childhood and this relatively very small country that was very, very green and very different than the way people thought, and what informed them, and what they thought was important in life was so different that it really, really made me want to see much more of the world. That's where my curiosity came from. It came from suddenly being transplanted into a whole other world and realizing that there couldn't just be two, there must be three and four and multiple amounts of worlds. And for each of them, they were normal. And so I always said traveling was just discovering new normals or different normals. So that's where it came from. It came from being forced to transplant ourselves across the world, and realizing that actually there was even more of the world to see.
Could you tell me about some of the books you've written?
Sure, but thank you for asking. So the first book I wrote was an illustrated guide to African elephants, and it won a prize for me when I was 10. But I'm not sure that's the book you were asking me about, although I'm very proud of the pictures I drew in that book. Um, I began my creative life as a filmmaker. I was the first British film director with a film in the cinemas. And then I had my first son, and he was very, very ill as a baby and growing up. So I chose to stay home with him and figure it out. And then we made him better. And I wrote a book to make sense of that. I wanted it to be the best friend that I didn't have at the time. And that was published. That's called Toasters Don't Roast Chickens. It was published and reprinted twice in 2 months. My second book was not picked up by a publisher. And by the time the third book came along, I didn't need that deal. And I became a crowd-funded publisher with a coffee table book about walking 800 kilometers over the Pyrenees and across Spain for 33 days with my two sons, who were only 16 and 12 at the time. It's a journey that's called the Camino. So that's currently my last book.
Are you thinking about writing any more?
Well, the thing is, that second book that I never got picked up by a publisher, that was about a trip across America. So we went from California to Los Angeles in California, to New York via the Grand Canyon and Detroit and Nashville and Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and we spent 7 weeks. And one of the things we did was my sons we had to pick one person every day who made a difference to our lives, and then we had to go and tell them. So my sons, who were a little bit younger than when we walked, they were 10 and 8, I think. They used to have to go up to somebody and go, "You just made our day," and then explain to them why. And even if it was a platform guard who'd really helped us, because I remember once we were in Chicago and the train was coming in and we couldn't figure out how to use the ticket machine, and we were trying so hard to figure it out, and somebody stepped in, the platform guard stepped in and just sorted it out for us, and meant we could get on the train, which meant the rest of our whole day worked out just fine. So we had to tell him that he'd made our day. And even big people, big gestures. We were in the Grand Canyon, and we were 3 hours from the nearest ATM to get any money out, and none of my debit cards worked, and I didn't have a credit card, and so we didn't actually have the ability to pay for dinner. And by the time we'd figured that out, a family had stepped in and paid for it for us. Oh. And it made such difference, because we were, really vulnerable and far away from any solution. And my eldest son, just said, one day I'm going to do that for someone. So they didn't just pay for our dinner; they sort of left a legacy in my children of how to operate in the world. So we spent 53 days going across the United States of America, telling people what difference they made in our lives. And we had waitresses crying in Cincinnati and things like that. So that is my book I've still got to write.
That's a really nice idea. I remember we've had a lot of trouble with ATMs ourselves, like especially in these like remote towns, or if you haven't got any money and then all the bankers decline the card. What do we do?
Yeah,
that could be. I think that's one of the worst things about traveling, is probably getting the money.
The technology.
Yeah, because also our bank, even though it's a travel credit card, every time we go to a new place, they always decline it because they think it's someone's taken our card, gone to another country, and is using our cards. So we always have to Skype them and call them and say, no, it's us, we've moved again. Please don't block our card.
Yeah, because we so need it, don't you? You're so vulnerable if you haven't got that little thing working every day.
Yeah, like it stops you from eating or
Yeah.
the place to stay. It really, I think, is such a small thing. It makes such a big difference. Like if it's you lost it or it stopped or whatever, like that could stop. You know, you eat.
That interrupts everything.
Yeah. What's the Camino, the first long trek that you've ever done?
It's certainly the first. Well, to be fair, it's the only long distance physical challenge that we'd gone on. I've taken my boys to Australia and done a tour around there for a month, and we did India, north to south down India, but on trains. So we did 96 hours on trains across or down India, but and then obviously we did the road trip across America. But and I think that's why my boys chose to do the Camino, because they kind of said, well, we've done trains and we've done cars, but we've never walked, and it seemed like such a good idea at the time. It seemed so easy, but I think all three of us just knew that there was going to be a time when we wouldn't be able to do things together because obviously they're growing up, and so I saw it as a space in which they could decide what kind of men they wanted to be, and like it was like a gift, like a love letter to them, because they've been amazing. They are amazing people, and I wanted to spend time with them, really spend time with them, like you guys get to do. And walking is really slow, so you really slow down, sort of to the speed that the earth is turning, and then you really do get to spend time and talk to each other because you haven't got anything else to do for like 26 miles of every day. So yeah, that was the first and the only long distance trek we'd done.
Like I remember when we went to every space camp, like usually I think when we go to places, when we get there, we have a look around, or be that we go on our computers or we make a video, but there's no time to really kind of relax or take a nap or things like that. So I think sometimes it's quite nice to just kind of, when you walk, especially like in very isolated areas where there's no Wi-Fi connection or things like that, to just kind of sit down and read a book or have some time to just relax.
I agree. I mean, we all love our phones or our devices, and I am a sucker for a good Netflix binge. I love that. But yes, there's certainly something really precious about just time, and that's kind of what we like about travel in general, is, and that's why we do it independently. It's because it just allows things to happen sort of spontaneously, and you can respond to it, and that really keeps you in the present. And that's what you're sort of saying about reading or just relaxing. It's just literally sinking in to what's happening now.
Like I think usually when you're at home, you're like, I'll read a book or something, but then it's always in the back of my mind, like, oh, I should probably make a YouTube video. I haven't done it in a while, or I should do the washing, or I should cook the dinner. But having the opportunity, like, you cannot do anything. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
You can't think about those things.
Yeah. Yes, and that's very observant of you. That was certainly a part of the experience of walking. If you're walking in the middle of nowhere, there's no should, because you can't do the laundry.
Yeah.
And you can't cook. and you can't, do any should at all. So yes, you're right. And I think doing a month of that was very grounding. So we spent quite a lot of time in our heads and with that should. I mean, you said like I should do a video or a YouTube. And I'm like, because we're creative people and communicators, we're always thinking about things like that we could do. But that, goes on in our head. And so the opportunity to walk and physically get in touch with the land all day, every day, was really grounding. And I noticed that we're all very centered people, don't really get knocked a lot by life.
Do you have a favourite place to travel?
Oh, no. No, don't ask me that. That's unfair. Because I bet you this is the same for you. You like them all for different reasons, right?
I think there's downfalls to all the places, but there's also good things about all the places. There's not one that's just all good things has happened and there's not another place where all bad things has happened. Like,
you're so right.
I could say, oh well, I didn't really like Beijing because it was like smoggy and crowded, but we went to the Great Wall of China and I loved that. So I wouldn't say that was a bad place because good things happened there.
Right. Well, we have a saying, we're like, even paradise has mosquitoes.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what travel has helped us to do, is just see the positive side of everything. I think the thing is that we're so aware of the bad things that happen in the world because it's on the news.
Yeah.
But when you're traveling, you are, in our experience, you're always meeting really generous people. Now that might be because only generous people talk to complete strangers. But we've always felt that people have helped us or got engaged in conversations with us, been curious, helped us with direction, something as simple as that. So every day you're seeing the good side of people, and every once in a while you see the bad side, or you see something that's not great, but you see so much good that you realize, if nothing else, it's balance. But our experience is that there's a lot more good out there, and so that tends to make us really optimistic people. So have I got a favorite place? We've been to Spain a lot. So I love Spain because I know it and I can talk the language, and there's a lot about it that feels familiar, but not like home. So it feels adventurous too. I love going to Los Angeles. I've been to Los Angeles at the key points in my life. I made a film in Los Angeles. Then we started our journey across America in Los Angeles. And I'd like to go back to Los Angeles and California and explore that a bit more. I'd love to come to South America, where you are now. I'd love that. I'd love to go to Iceland. I mean, I'd love to go to Iceland. Probably not for very long. You're better at cold than me, perhaps. Perhaps you could come with us, teach me how to do it. And then sometimes I think what I'd really like to do is learn to scuba dive and go and see all the reefs in the world.
Yeah.
So,
carry on.
No, I was just going to say, so maybe sometimes it's more about, like I've just taken up surfing and I don't live anywhere near the coast. So I keep thinking what I'd like to do is go and do all the surfing spots around the world. And so maybe it's not a country I want to do. Maybe it's a thing I want to do.
Like an experience.
Yeah. And wherever that experience, whichever country that is in, that's where I want to go.
Do you have favourite photos you like to take, for example, like people, landscape?
Oh, that's an interesting question, isn't it? I think the thing is that what I like to take photographs of isn't the same as what I like to do. So I love being in landscapes. and I'm sure you do, you know, that like there's just nothing better than that vast feeling of the planet is huge. But I always forget to take photographs when I'm in that experience. So the things I take photographs of are the things that sort of take my interest right there and then, because photography is such a momentary creative activity. And so people endlessly fascinate me. And I can sort of look at people with a slight little distance, or without, like a landscape I just get completely involved in and become part of. And people I can sort of see as separately and watch them doing it. And I think I like watching people moving around the space in the world, because we're weird and do all sorts of odd things. And sometimes we're not even aware that there might be 100 other people around us and we'll do something just interesting. And I've got a project in my town that I've been doing for 6 years, where I've taken photographs of us in our own town and how we kind of move through the public spaces. And they're mostly sort of street photography. And so people aren't really aware, they're really natural. They aren't really aware they're being photographed particularly. And watching how or looking at 6 years of photographs of how people use my town, which is fairly small, it's just fascinating. I think, yeah, I'd have to say that photographing people is more intriguing for me as a photographer. And I think that's possibly, I do like to see how people in the world interest me, how we all act together, what we do, what stops us doing things, what makes us afraid, how do we occupy our days, those sort of things. You and I have chosen very different, very non-normal lives. And so I look at everyone else and I find it fascinating what they do with their days every day.
Yeah, I think I would say it's like abnormal because, how do I say this? But I think everybody has something in their life that they do that's completely different or special. Like they've got, I think that everybody's got some kind of inspiring story. I think everybody's once in their life has done something that's incredible or inspiring, and that's why I want to make conversations to inspire, to show that like everybody is inspiring, not just like big time celebrities or travelers or everybody.
Well, we are kind of aligned, because that's what I ended up giving lots of talks about our walk across Spain. And a lot of people used to come to me afterwards and say, I want what you have. And I didn't understand what it was at first, but I worked it out, is that they wanted their stories to matter. So I was up on the stage talking about my life and what I'd done with it, or this one thing that I'd done. And I had a national tour, and I had a book, and I had a TED talk, and media coverage and radio stations, and everybody in the audience, or at least the people I spoke to, that's what they wanted. And it wasn't, as you say, it wasn't about celebrity. It was just about making their story matter, and they wanted to be noticed, and they wanted the something that they'd done to be acknowledged and to inspire others with it. So I think you're absolutely right. When I was talking about the photography, it's like what we do when we're not conscious, but you're right. Every one of us has a story to tell, or is inspiring. And the more we could inspire each other, the more we'll give other people courage to do what they want to do, or to get out there and make their stories matter.
If you became queen of the world, what would be the first thing that you would do?
Well, here's the interesting thing. So what do you think about being a woman in this world?
Um, that's a tough question because I think everybody has different views. Like, some think that it's unfair, some people don't see a problem with it. So that's kind of an interesting question because everybody thinks different things.
So if I became queen of the world, I think the first thing I'd tackle would be equity. Because I came from a third world country, and and I am a woman. Um, it doesn't hold anyone back. We all have our race to run, but I think I'd try and tackle greed, but I'd certainly tackle equity and try and make equity is not the same as equality. Equality means if I don't have as much as you, I still have an equal chance to get it. Equities means I make it a level playing field. So I might not be able to solve it, but I think that's what I'd tackle.
I think for me, um, like, I think I know some ladies that say women should be higher than men because, like, we're the ones that have the children or we're the ones that, do stuff in this world. But I think no, because it would be the same problem, but in reverse. It'd be the men that have the women's problem. So I think that it should just be equal, not any less, not any more, just equal.
Just a level playing field,
Uh-huh.
and respected for what it contributes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Like, women respect the men and men respect the women, so not any more, not any less.
Well, I'm very hopeful about the future because your generation is such an inspiring generation. It's the most, it has the most amount of information available to it. So, when I was born, we didn't have an internet, etc. And then obviously, that came along through my life, but you've been born into that world. You're a native internet user, and that just crosses all boundaries. Like, I was so fascinated by how a camera could take a picture and tell a story to the rest of the world about a little tiny interesting place in my back garden. You literally can have access to the whole world, and all of these different influences come in, and so you have a completely different normal as a generation that is so much more inclusive and so much wider, and has examples, not just somebody saying there's lots of possibility. It's not the same as saying, oh, you can be anything you want, but actually not having any example of what those options are. Your generation can literally see other people doing something you might want to do, and so you can see it's possible. And I think that your generation is truly disruptive and really is hopeful, because it's more gender blind and more race blind and more aware of different normals. And so I think your generation is the most amazing, which means I have hope for all of that equity, equality thing.
If you could meet anyone, past, present, real, not real, you see it in the movie, or whoever, who would it be and why?
Well, apart from meeting you today, which obviously was on my wish list, so past or present, I think when I was a little girl, I always wanted to meet Elizabeth I as a queen, because I saw her as an amazing leader, or even though it was probably she survived in a fractious world, and I mean, she did some amazing things. It's called the golden era for a time, but I think as I've grown up, I've realized I'm not actually that interested in court, and that if I met her, maybe she'd tell me a lot more about court life than what I thought she'd teach me. But I then realized I've been absolutely fascinated by a woman called Freya Stark. Do you know her at all?
No.
Okay, so she's dead. Rest in peace. But she was a British Italian explorer, and she was a travel writer. But she was one of the first non-Arabs to travel in Arab countries. And obviously she was a woman, so she was even more unusual. And in 1931, she had completed 3 dangerous treks into the wilderness in Iran, where no Westerner had ever visited. And she discovered the valleys of the assassins. I mean, it was a legend, but she discovered where they actually were. And she wrote books and things. And I think that she might be really fascinating to talk to. So if I had to sit down and talk to somebody, I think Queen Elizabeth would be a bit of a blast, but she might be a bit busy, and maybe she'd be a bit impenetrable. Maybe I wouldn't get any clear answers. But I think Freya and I could probably hang out together quite a long time, and she'd make really interesting company. I think I'd learn a lot from her. So I think that's the one I'd probably like to meet.
What would be your perfect day?
Ah, okay. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because you try and choose, don't you? You're like, do I want a day off? Or do I want a day where I'm actually doing the thing that I love doing? And I'm not saying I don't love days off, but if we really loved days off, we'd spend all our time doing that. So we do this other thing, which must be because we're really passionate about it. So I think I'd go with the day that I was doing something I'm really passionate about. And I'm genuinely passionate about getting people to tell their own stories. This thing we were talking about. So I'm really passionate about, well, when somebody says, oh, I'd really like to write a book, or I'd really like to make a film, or, well, you know, I've worked a long time and I'm not got as far as I thought I could, but I guess that's the way it is, or something like that. That's the bit where I just love stepping in and going, no, come on, you can do this, and then figuring out how to help them take the next step. I love that. I love standing in rooms full of lots of people talking about how they can make their lives matter, and then watching like hundreds of faces sort of smile because they suddenly realize the possibilities there for them. You know, when the other day somebody said to me, oh, but Mel, I couldn't do that, what you've done, because you're incredible. And that's when I'm like, no. I know that you think you're complimenting me, but what you're really saying is that it's not possible for yourself. And I won't accept that. That's the bit where I love to step in and go, no, you can make this happen for you. And helping people to see it for themselves. And then, you know, setting them on their way. So I think that would be my perfect day, would be a room full of 300 people who we did that for. And then I'd have a day off.
Yeah, I never really thought about that, because to me it kind of seems different because it seems like work. But I always you kind of think, oh, we'll go to a theme park or something, not like what you said. But yeah, I never really thought about that before, like actually helping people, making a difference.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
you see, you're doing this. Now, you don't have to do it, do you?
no,
But you kind of like it. And you're getting to inspire people. And as you say, conversations that inspire, literally. Well, that's got to be a good day, isn't it?
Yeah, I remember trying to come up with a name, but I had absolutely no idea what to call it, because I wanted something that kind of explained what it was and kind of put the whole thing into one tiny little sentence. And then my mum came up with, oh, what about conversations to inspire? Because you're having conversations with someone and you hopefully will inspire someone. I said, yeah, that's what I am doing. So I just call it what it is.
Yeah, does what it says on the tin. Well, if it hadn't been the right name, then you wouldn't have, you know, agreed with your mum, would you? So it must have just been the right name.
Uh-huh. And I think it summed the whole thing up in 2 words, or actually 3 words, but
Yeah, I agree. I think, the people know what they're going to get when they come to it. Says it right there. And then that means that they can, get ready just through your title. They're then ready to sit and listen and be inspired.
Do you spend all day talking about?
Oh, well, what we're doing, I could literally spend all day in conversation with people, like digging down, asking them questions and digging down into what made them tick, and then solving it, go in there and pull it out and make them see it themselves. So I kind of like talking to people and about them. It makes me a hard conversationalist because I'm rubbish at small talk, because I'm always there asking the direct question. And it makes people, if I'm at a party, it's just too much. But I'm a grown up, so I can pull back if I have to. But I do love that bit. That's what I love, talking about possibility and life and how to live it.
Do you like change your life? Because I know that some people, they like it, and they're always changing things about their life. Every day they do different things, or get tattoos, or change their hair, or go live in other places. And some people are kind of afraid of it, and they want everything to stay the same. They kind of back away from change. So, how do you feel about change?
Oh, is it an either or? It's a bit like world is divided into people who wear watches and people who don't. But oh no, I love change. Well, I don't know that. See, there are two different types of change, aren't there? There's the change we want. Who doesn't love that? Like if you say want to move country or want to change something, then you're going to love it. And then there's the change that you're made to go through, like a disease or a divorce or a death or something like that. And I think that's less lovable. But I think that you can learn to like change. I think you can learn to love change. I mean, there's that saying, isn't there? Love is inevitable except from a vending machine. And given that nothing stays the same, I think you can learn to love change and see it as possibility. And I mean, there are some changes that I didn't really like. Like I didn't really like losing my dad when he died. I'm a single mum. And when that happened at the beginning, I don't think I really liked it. I think that was tough. But I've learned to love it because, it's one of those things. When change is forced on you, you have two choices. It's either the best thing that happens to you or the worst thing that happens to you. And you're sure as heck which is the answer you're going to go with. And then you just have to do everything you can to make that true. And I think in changing, you always learn so much about how much you could do that you didn't realize you could. And that's always amazing. So yeah, I'm one of those people that's definitely learned to like change. That doesn't mean I don't like a day off.
For me, it's kind of in the middle, because I said this before, but I don't I don't love change. Well, again, it depends what kind of change it is, but I'm not. I'm totally different from my parents, because I'm more a fan of routine. Not like really like you wake up at this time, you go to bed at this time, you eat at this time, but like knowing kind of what's going to happen. Like, oh, tomorrow I'm going to go to a swimming pool, and then I'm going to go to somewhere else. Not exactly, but still like a rough idea. So I don't like it where it's like, oh well, we'll just walk out and whatever happens happens. Whereas my parents do like that. They don't like to plan anything, and like usually when we're traveling, it's one day before we're due to leave that we actually plan where we're going next. And so for me, I'm not the biggest fan of change, but I'll accept it. So I
Right.
won't try and push it away or try and escape from it. I'll you know, as long as it covers, then there's nothing much I can do about it. So I don't like it that much, but I'll let it happen. So yeah, kind of in the middle.
Okay. I mean, there is that the thought that change usually means the world is getting bigger, even if it's like but through a bad experience. It means that we know that. So we have that whole thing where we'd like the world to be really, really big, really vast, but we'd like to be really familiar with it. So it sounds like you're sort of saying, I'd like enough familiarity to be able to relax into my days, but I don't want to stop change. I don't want to stop growing.
Yeah.
And that's the balance, isn't it? It's like, I've got to change, or I've got to go with this change because I've got to grow. But I just like to. Actually, it would be quite nice if I knew what I was doing, and I was really familiar with it. And that's kind of what I like going to Spain. As I said earlier, I'm familiar with Spain, so it's like traveling, but I know what I'm doing, but I'm not at home. And that sounds to me like what you're sort of saying is like, and maybe your parents are more used to change, so it feels like a littler thing for them.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, come on, every day is really big, and it's old, and I'd quite like just to get to the point where actually I'm easy and comfortable with it. So you're not afraid of it. You just wish you were comfortable with it.
Inspires you and why?
Well, I think I already said that. You. So who inspires me? My sons genuinely inspire me. I think when people ask who inspires you, it's supposed to be somebody who's done something more than you, but that you admire. So then I would have to admire the people who changed the world. And that might be somebody obvious like Gandhi or Mandela, or maybe Marie Curie, or but there are that, you know, they are people that change the way we thought to be more peaceful. I think that's who I would admire. Anybody who changes the way we think to be more peaceful. So you know, Michelle Obama at the moment, I'd love to meet her. There are an awful lot of young people I'm looking forward to meeting, because I think they're going to change the way we think.
Who would you love to see me interview next?
Ooh, exciting. Okay. Okay, well, there are some real shakers out there. I would love you to interview somebody like really prominent, but that people may not be paying attention to, who's really shaking things up. Somebody like the black female governor of Georgia, Stacey Adams. Okay, so she would be like a big flagship person. I'd watch that interview. But there's, I don't know if you saw a music video called "This Is America."
No.
Oh, okay. Well, look it up on YouTube. But the choreographer of that is a woman called Sherry Silver. She's so super talented and really intriguing. But if it was somebody in the travel world, so that was somebody who is in your field, Kira Salak, Roz Savage. But there's also, I know who you might be interested in. There's a woman, she's now a woman. She's called Jessica Watson. But at 13 years old, she announced the plans to sail non-stop and unassisted around the world. And then 3 days before her 17th birthday, she became the youngest person to do that. She'd be super interesting to talk to. Not that I know any of these people and can introduce you to them, but they would be, you know, they're all heroines.
I'm trying.
Who do you want to interview? What do you want to get out of an interview with somebody?
Well, I want to not just interview just all travellers or all families or all women or all men. I want to do a bit of everybody. So I want to spread that like you could be anything. You don't have to be a traveler, or you don't have to, you know, be a photographer. You could be anything. So like I interviewed a woman who makes chocolates, or someone who moved to Thailand. So I just someone anyone really, just to learn about their life. But maybe there's someone out there that's watching my videos and they go, "Oh, I would love to do that." And be
Ah,
able to have a wide range of people. So there's every type of person that watches my YouTube videos could get something out of at least one of the conversations to inspire.
okay. Well, I'm going to get back to you. I'm going to have a think about all the people I know, and I'm going to get back to you and suggest somebody who I can actually introduce you to.
That'd be
Would
great.
that be more fun?
Yeah, that'd be great. I tried to get people like, because I think at first I kind of asked, oh, I could interview anyone. Who would you like to be to interview? I guess perhaps no one really thought that it was really serious. You know, perhaps people thought it was just like a one thing, like a few days. But and people were kind of joking around saying, "Oh, you could interview me or interview Donald Trump or things like that." And I'm trying to get people like, "No, this is serious," you know. But and hopefully that people will connect to go, "I would love you to interview so and so. I'd love to see that," or you know, so people can get something out of it and kind of take it more seriously, not just like, "Oh, there's a kid interviewing somebody." Just like, yeah,
Yeah, and certainly that's partly why I thought maybe you get a prominent big hitter who gives you the credibility. Um, but let me think about some of the people I know and see if I can get some of them to pre-agree to talk to you.
that'd be great.
Yeah, cool.
So thank you so much for being on the Conversations to Inspire. It was great.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a real honor to be invited.
Thank you, Melanie, for being on Conversations to Inspire. And thank you guys for watching. If you'd like to know more about Melanie, her website, Facebook, details are in the description below.